Prostitutes and sex toys on a Florida campus, the latest on the campus event featuring a convicted cop killer, labeling him a political prisoner. Find out what the killer himself told Campus Reform. A California university stops accepting SAT and ACT scores for admission. Take a wild guess why. And a diversity officer wishes death upon the only black justice on the Supreme Court. I'm Peter Cordy. This is Campus Countdown. In our number 3 story of the week, the University of Florida brings prostitutes to campus as part of their sex event series. As if the prevalence of OnlyFans wasn't bad enough, now the school is promoting the honorable profession of sex work through a panel of prostitutes giving students the opportunity to, quote, learn from sex workers about their experiences via a panel. The university's Pride Student Union also hosted a sex toy raffle where they gave away $300 worth of contraceptives and sex toys to students, which would be bad enough, but it was the University of Florida Healthcare Center who donated the toys for this event. I'm sorry, but the school does not need to be donating pink dildos to be raffled off to students. That's beyond inappropriate. And to bring sex workers to campus, many of which are prostitutes, is to glorify criminals. Need I remind you that prostitution is still a crime, and it's not a victimless one. But besides that, people go to college so they can be set up for success in life, to have a respectable job. Think of all the underrepresented students and women in STEM on campus. Are sex workers really the best role models to look up to? College is supposed to equip young women to never have to think about being a prostitute, so this is just backwards. Campus Reform spoke to several students about the events, and one said it is really changing the culture of the UF students and how we think and how we act in student culture. He further described the events as bizarre and demonic. The fact is, this is the inevitable result of the moral breakdown of society, and it all starts on campus, as today's students are tomorrow's leaders, and they're being desensitized to sexual perversion by the very colleges that are supposed to be edifying them. And as UF students are being desensitized to sexual perversion, SUNY Brockport students are being desensitized to cop killers, as the school had a man who murdered 2 police officers speak at an event this week. Joining Campus Countdown to break this down for us is SUNY Brockport correspondent Sarah Prentice, who attended the event and led protests against it.
Thanks, Peter. In our number 2 story of the week, a convicted cop killer spoke on my campus, SUNY Brockport, last night. Jaleel Muntakim spoke at an event titled History of Black Resistance, U.S. Political Prisoners and Genocide. Jaleel Muntakim, who previously went by Anthony Bottom, was recently released after spending 49 years in prison for the brutal, premeditated assassination of police officers. While he was in prison, he converted to Islam and changed his name to Muntakim, which, by the way, means one who enacts vengeance. This is not the kind of person that should be promoted and celebrated to university students. The school is bringing in a man who killed cops to campus, sending the message that murder of police officers is okay, but that the police, the ones who keep us safe, are to be feared instead. My peers and I also find it insulting to be invited to an event labeling him as a political prisoner. Freedom of speech is one thing, but do not lie to us in order to promote an anti-cop agenda. At the event, the cop killer claimed that black people are being genocided in America. Muntakim stated at the event that he understands that the people like myself who are protesting are hurt, but followed up by rhetorically asking, how are you going to change 400 years of trauma? The former Black Panther Party and Black Liberation Army member spoke about his time in the Black liberation struggle and asserted that he was honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy of resistance. Back to you.
Thanks, Sarah. In our number 1 story of the week, the California State University system has ditched standardized testing and will no longer consider SAT and ACT scores in their admission process. This was done in the name of equity and fairness, as the campus left has repeatedly denounced standardized testing as none other but racist. Think about the implications of calling standardized testing racist. These leftists are actually implying that white people are inherently better and thus we need to lower the standards for everyone to be more equitable. That in itself is problematic, to say the least. Look, nobody likes standardized testing, but we can't just call everything we don't like racist. And this is a growing trend in academia, as Campus Reform has reported on professors calling things like math, science, and even professionalism racist. And as standardized testing will no longer be considered, Cal State will instead be using students' high school GPA as the primary consideration for admission. Yet this gives students who took easier classes in high school an advantage over the academically gifted who otherwise would have scored higher on standardized testing. The point of a standardized test is that it's supposed to be more objective. Everyone takes the same exam covering the same topics at the same difficulty level. But your GPA is dependent on so many factors that vary from school to school, class to class, and teacher to teacher. The school further expressed their goal of eliminating their reliance on a high-stress, high-stakes test for admitting students, apparently forgetting that in the real world, when these students get a job, they'll need to be prepared for a high-stress, high-stakes environment every single day. But this is what happens when equity takes priority over sanity. And this week's Woke Tweet of the Week goes to UCLA's Director for Race and Equity, Jonathan Perkins, who wished for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to die while he was sick in the hospital. During Justice Thomas's hospitalization, Perkins tweeted, "No one wants to openly admit we all hope Clarence Thomas dies," going on to say that this whole rule we're not supposed to wish ill on people is silly. He further called the only black justice on the Supreme Court a sexist token and referred to him as Uncle Thomas, racially charged language typically meant to disparage black people. After facing backlash for his tweets, Perkins doubled down and said, "Clarence Thomas can choke as far as I'm concerned," claiming the justice, quote, "deserves it for undoing generations of legal civil rights progress." The irony of UCLA's Director of Race and Equity wishing for the Supreme Court's lone black justice to die and hurling racial epithets in his direction would be laughable if it wasn't so disturbing. This just goes to show that the people leading the charge for diversity, equity, and inclusion do not care about minorities who disagree with them on politics in many cases. And in the case of Perkins specifically, he'd rather see a black man die than have his voice represented on the Supreme Court. Well, that's all we have for you today. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our social media platforms and campusreform.org for all the latest liberal lunacy being pushed on campus.